Hi, I'm Katie Sieben, the State Senator for District 54. We just completed the 2014 legislative session, and I'm here today with State Representative Denny McNamara and State Representative Dan Schoen. We're going to talk about the successful legislative session and get our insight into how the session went. So Denny, why don't we start with you? Tell the good listeners a little bit about yourself and where you represent and that sort of thing.
Well, thank you, Senator. Good to be here and good to say hello to everyone. I'm Denny McNamara, State Representative from Hastings, represent Hastings and Nininger Township in Dakota County, and then eastern part of Cottage Grove, Denmark Township, and Afton in Washington County. And it's fun to be here with Representative Schoen and Senator Sieben to say hello to folks just the week before Strawberry Days.
Yep, and Representative Schoen, you're a Cottage Grove police officer here in town. Why don't you tell the people about yourself a little more?
Yeah, thank you. It is fantastic to be here with Representative McNamara, Senator Sieben. I live in St. Paul Park and represent the other portion of Cottage Grove, and St. Paul Park, Newport, South St. Paul, and of course Grey Cloud Island Township. And it was a great session that we wound up getting done pretty quickly this year, and in a short amount of time and ahead of schedule.
And also, folks may not remember, but we started about 6 weeks later than we traditionally do. It was not a budget year, it was a bonding year. So let's talk first about the bonding bill. Ultimately, we passed a bill that was over $1 billion in investments that will target public infrastructure all around the state. Denny, you worked hard on a trail connection. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we had a couple of things in our district. We had the trail that's right down on the very edge of Hastings in South Washington County that's going to connect. The trail on the Hastings Bridge ended right by Kings Cove driveway, and we needed a connection and a bridge over the second railroad tracks there. And part of this year's bonding bill included that connection where it'll tie in with a future Washington County trail that'll go over towards Prescott, Wisconsin. So that was a real important part, and I was glad to get that one done. We both worked, all three of us worked hard to make that happen, and so that was a good thing.
And Representative Schoen, the Hero Center is something you really put a lot of time and effort into. Tell the listeners about that.
Well, you know, the Hero Center is the Health and Emergency Response Occupation Center that we've worked in conjunction with Inver Hills Community College. We used to have higher education over on this side of the river in Cottage Grove when the mall at 8200 Hadley had a satellite classroom, a couple satellite classrooms in there. And right now, students that are in law enforcement school, if they want to take a skills program, they have to drive all the way up to Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park area to Hennepin Tech. And as you can understand with the expansion of traffic and congestion, you're talking sometimes 45 minutes to an hour drive for our students that live down here. In our district alone, the number of students that actually attend Inver Hills Community College is pretty large. So we're working with them on their paramedic program and their law enforcement program, as well as Regions EMS, who does a lot of medical direction for us, and I believe they also do Hastings Fire Department as well too. And to do a lot of training. There'll be an indoor firearms range that will be accessible to the public. Also a lot of technology built into simulator training. And Representative McNamara and I worked together to get that done in the House bonding bill, and then Senator Sieben was pretty fantastic to make sure we got it through with the Senate too.
So Representative Schoen, if I remember it correctly, it'll have both classrooms in it and a shooting range. And it's now, this was the design, this is the preliminary money, and
yep,
to begin the process. So it's a really good thing and a good thing for our area.
And the cities in the surrounding area will partner.
Yeah. Right now, Cottage Grove has taken the lead on this, and Woodbury has been right in there helping along as well because they see the need. And when you just take Cottage Grove and Woodbury alone and think about what the next 15, 20 years are going to be for growth here, the number of households that even the Met Council projects is the growth is going to be pretty phenomenal. And we've seen the building permits that have come from just Cottage Grove and Woodbury alone have just really skyrocketed.
Over this legislative session, at the beginning of this session, there was talk about medical marijuana or medical cannabis That issue seemed like it wasn't going to go anywhere this legislative session. And then towards the end, the tide shifted, as we see happens a lot during sessions. And ultimately, we ended up passing medical cannabis legislation. As a peace officer, police officer, Representative Schoen, I know that your expertise was called on to help bring some perspective from law enforcement. Why do you think that bill ultimately ended up passing this session?
Well, I really think it was heavily to do with members of the public and really expressing their support. But in the end, I think so many people came together to work on a bill that took good public safety policy, those concerns, and then compassion for the sickest Minnesotans. And I think that when we put the two bills together in the end, that there was a closer connect to what the governor said he would sign and what law enforcement wouldn't, or the law enforcement representative groups, not law enforcement officers necessarily, that they would actually support or not oppose, I should say. And that was a big deal. And now, of course, it's brand new legislation, and I believe that we've got some work to do in the future. And I know listening to Denny made some actually really good comments about just the operations, about if we only had one place to grow it, what happens if there was an infestation or if there was a fire or anything. And I remember when you talked about that, that really on the initial bill really sunk in with me as a part of something that we really needed to consider. And when we put the Senate and House bill together, we at least addressed that this year, and we'll have to see what we can do in the future to make it more accessible for those folks all over the state of Minnesota.
Well, and that was, if I could add, that in the original House bill, as Representative Schoen said, we only had one facility, and I don't think that was really practical, because if people would come to depend on their medical marijuana and they would need it, we wouldn't want something to go wrong with that facility. So I was glad the governor was willing to accept that we would have a couple of growing ranges and a few distribution points, so people, say, living up in Roseau wouldn't have to drive down to the Twin Cities, because as Dan said, there's some really sick people that are going to get helped by this, and I'm glad we were able to and truthfully, with Representative Schoen's leadership in helping with the police officers' concerns, which they've got some legitimate concerns about, here now we're going to have some marijuana around, is that going to be a problem? But I think we were able to address those concerns just because the need for some of these young kids. I mean, there was examples of families that literally split their family, and the mother and one child moved to Colorado so the little kid could get treatment. And so we're going to be able to bring them back together. So I think that's a really good thing.
I was really shocked by the number of 70-plus-year-old citizens and neighbors that came to me and said, we use OxyContin or oxycodone-based medicine for pain pills, and they're tired of it. And I remember getting out of my car and having my neighbors say, "Are you going to pass that medical marijuana?" I thought I was in trouble, and I said, "Well, I got to be honest with you, I hope so." And she said, "Me too." Yeah. And I expected more resistance from those folks, but it was actually pretty supportive.
Thinking about that bill and then the WESA bill, which is the Women's Economic Security Act, that was a combination of 9 bills that were all aimed to help women in Minnesota, working women in Minnesota, be more successful. Those bills both, in the end, ended up having pretty significant bipartisan support. Representative McNamara, what did you like about the WESA bill, or is there any provision you wanted to mention that you were especially glad to support?
Well, Senator Sieben, I just think we have to do what we can to get good balance and allow, truthfully, women have the challenges. I'm thinking, as we're talking about it, my daughter-in-law is, our newest granddaughter, Kate, was just born at Christmas, so she's not even 6 months old. Well, she's still nursing them. Well, she happens to work at Patterson Dental, where they have great facilities, so she can do that during her workday, but that's not necessarily true at all places. And as you know today, it's so much data about how good it is for a mother to continue to nurse their babies. Well, My daughter-in-law, Jenny, wants to go back to work. She likes working, but she also wants to be really good for her granddaughter. So those are some of the things in the bill. And then the reality is still today, men make more than women lots of times, and whatever we can do to balance that out. I just think it was good to see us come together, and it was a session where we got more along than didn't get along this time, and so I think there was good things.
There was also, it didn't necessarily get the strong bipartisan support, but a big accomplishment of the session was raising the minimum wage. Representative Schoen, I remember hearing from a lot of constituents who said that it's really important that Minnesota's minimum wage catch up with the rest of the country, and then we also actually moved it beyond what many other states are doing, so that the minimum wage will grow to $9.50 an hour by 2016. What did you hear from constituents in terms of support for that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I heard that same thing, and when you looked at the math, it was an amazing amount of people in our communities that were affected by the minimum wage, and that their salaries would go up. And in Cottage Grove, St. Paul Park, Newport, and South St. Paul, and all over District 54, we have a good number of folks that, because of their wages, required extra services from the state and the county. And this really, really helps set them apart. But what I found even more interesting is not long after we passed that bill, other states and cities were not far behind us and actually reaching higher than we did.
The other interesting thing is that the minimum wage bill, to tie it back to the Women's Economic Security Act, it was interesting to learn that almost 2/3 of the people who make minimum wage are women in Minnesota. So it certainly will help improve the economic status of women around the state.
If I can add, Katie, to that, where it's good that people make $9.75 instead of $6.50 or wherever we were at. The reality is we need good jobs in Minnesota where people make a living wage, and they say a living wage is more like about $15 an hour. So whatever we can do to create jobs in Minnesota, good private sector jobs where people are making a good living wage, as we know today they need to make good money to get by with all the costs of just being a family today.
Well, it's a fair point that it highlights that $9.50 is a step. It doesn't mean that families can just make it on $9.50 either. That's a very good point. It's going to be getting those jobs in.
Legislators are about the only ones that only make $10 an hour.
You think it comes out to $10 an hour?
Well, it might not even come out
I'm not
quite
sure
to
it
that
does,
much,
depending on how many hours we end up putting in.
Sometimes it seems
But
like it isn't.
you don't do it for the money.
No.
That's for sure. The one issue over the last 2 years that's gotten certainly a lot of emotional debate is gun legislation, gun control. Following the school shootings around the country, there was a push to pass more significant gun bills. Ultimately, that didn't happen in the last legislative session, but this year there was a more targeted piece of legislation that I think ended up getting even supported by the National Rifle Association. I know that you both voted for it. Why don't you tell us a little more about it?
Well, I was the chief author in the House on that bill. That was the Domestic Violence Act that we basically said that if you're convicted of domestic violence or you have a court-ordered order for protection via a hearing, that you can't possess firearms.
And it's a good bill. It was a good thing to pass and really strong. And Representative Schoen led that in the House, and it was a great bill.
We just worked hard to get people together and something that everybody could support, and I appreciated your support and those folks that stood up on both sides of the aisle that said, this is the right way to go.
Well, it looks like we're out of time, but thank you both, and hopefully we'll do this again soon.
Thank you.